Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your hosts, Nora Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yes, and we want to thank you for joining us live tonight. We have a bunch of our favorite people here, and I'm sure a bunch of our other favorite people are watching on the replay, as well as the new folks. So, hi to those guys. We've had a lot of new people coming around and watching our videos, so I'm glad you're here, and so is Mushtaq. And we are also happy to see when you guys offer us feedback on our videos, because that's helpful for us on a lot of levels. Do you want to tell us about that, Mushtaq?
Yes. God, do you remember back when we first started this and we got our very first comment? Comment number 1. It was like we almost threw a party. And now we're getting several comments a day on videos, and it's very, very exciting because each one of your comments helps make our content better. Without your feedback, sometimes we don't even know what to do. We're like wandering around confused, which happens anyway for me. But so thank you for your comments. Thank you for your subscriptions. This is very exciting. As you know, we're having a subscription drive because YouTube has done this thing where they're monetizing our videos against our will. And the only way that I can see to get around it is to get up to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watching, and then become one of their YouTube partners, and then manually demonetize every single video, and to hell with these people.
Yep, if that's the way we got to do it, that's what we're going to do, because we do not want our videos being used to promote things that we do not support.
And we also don't want our videos to be spamming you with commercials. Yeah. I find that incredibly obnoxious.
I mean, from the beginning, we said we didn't want to do advertising, so
yeah,
we're going to find whatever ways we can to avoid that.
Yeah, and it's amusing because we never planned to have a big channel. We figured 200-300 people would be fine. You know, contemplating the idea of 1,000 people watching our videos is frankly a little frightening.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that. It is a little scary to think about all those eyes on us.
But we will hold up under the pressure.
So tough. But here we are. Here's what we're doing. Today, we're going to be talking about hazard.
Hazard. Should we do the spiel before that?
Yeah, we probably should. Okay. That was our mini spiel, but now we got to do the...
Yeah, now we got to do the maxi spiel. All right. Thank you all for watching this video. Those of you who are here already know all of this because you come around from time to time. But for anybody who's watching us on the replay on YouTube, welcome if you haven't been here before, and welcome back if you have. We would like to invite each and every one of all of you to subscribe to this channel. Also to like the video. It really helps us when you like the video to get us up in YouTube's whatever it is that they're doing, and get more people to watch us so that we can cheat YouTube out of money by not letting them advertise on our channels.
Yes, that's the plan.
Yes. Welcome, subscribe, please. Make comments because we love your comments. Recommend us to your friends if you like us. If you don't like us, recommend us to your enemies. We will appreciate it, and they will probably feel terrible watching us, so by all means. That joke is getting old, but I still like it. And something important things.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh yeah, like the thumbs up, like the thumbs down, love us, hate us, whatever, let us know. If you would like to be part of this motley crew, because people have been asking now on the comments, how do I get on this thing?
Yeah.
It's very simple. If you look in the description of this video, there is a link to our mailing list. And if you're on our mailing list, we mail out an invitation to everybody on our mailing list every week. And we promise not to spam you. Unlike Google, we're not going to go evil. We're not going to sell your address or trade your address or bend, spindle, fold, or mutilate your address or anything else with your address other than send you the occasional cool thing.
The updates.
And you can also join our YouTube channel, or not our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, yeah.
Yes.
Which you'll also find the link down there. Yep. So, there you have it.
And we each have one opening left each for new clients.
Yeah, personal consultations with the crazy people. I mean, with us.
What? Zainab, hi. Okay. So, I think that wraps up the spiel pretty good today. I think we're...
Yeah, that's... You got to do it, but you got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, Hazard, yes?
Yes, let's talk about Hazard. What do you want to say about Hazard?
Well, as we've defined it for today, we are going to be talking about Hazard as... Where's my document? Kind of an element of fundamental uncertainty. That means it's like chance, sort of, you know, as we said in our title card, God does in fact roll dice, so to speak. So
yes,
we're going to be discussing that.
Yeah, and the word we got from, or I got from Mr. Bennett, who is one of the, probably my single favorite teacher in the Gurdjieff tradition. And he actually wrote a book on the subject, and I highly recommend it.
It is called Hazard.
It is called Hazard, yes. And I'm sure you can find it on Amazon or someplace like that, or at your local library, or around somewhere. But well worth checking out. He introduced me to this idea decades ago, and it stuck with me, so it's a good thing to talk about. Now, this is not a new idea. This idea goes back thousands of years. And it has been suggested by those who know that there was a particular game that goes back all the way to Sumeria that was designed to teach people about hazard. It's a fun game. I've actually played it a lot because you can buy the game in stores now. It's called the Royal Game of and at the end I will actually put up a couple of links to the British Museum's stuff on it, just because it's very, very cool. And I'm going to show you a picture of it. I'm going to screen share this picture. And let me know when you can see it. Should be right about now.
Here we go.
Good. So what you see here is the Royal Game of and we actually know how it was played because this guy from the Royal Museum found a clay tablet with the instructions for the game. And it's a race game where black and white chase the board in order to get all 7 pieces on and off. And there is strategy for where to land. It's like these little rosette pieces. If you land on them, you get double turns and nobody can knock your piece off the board. Any other place, your pieces can be knocked off the board. So you have all of these strategies you have to figure out for how to get where you're going without getting your pieces knocked off the board. And the first one who gets all of their pieces all the way around the board and off again wins. Now these weird things are your dice. They're tetrahedrons. And 2 points have colored dots on them and 2 don't. So these dice are 0 and 1, which I've always found terribly amusing. And you cast the dice, and if you get a blank point up, that's a 0. And so in this case you have 3, and you could move 3 spaces. You have to move the full number of spaces, but you can't land on anybody else's space of your own. But if you land on somebody's space for your opponent, you knock them off the board and they have to go back and start over again. So there's a huge amount of strategy in this game. And in all of the times I've played it, no matter how it goes in the middle, it usually comes down to each player having one piece left, and you're trying madly to get off the board before the other guy. But the thing is, no matter how good your strategy, the dice throw hazard in your way. You have this great plan, and the moment you throw the dice, the plan goes to hell, and you have to immediately calculate another plan. And they say that this board was this game was specifically designed to teach you how to deal with hazard. And we know that there was all sorts of mystical significance in Sumeria and Babylon attached to this game. So it's and this is probably the great-great-great-great-grandfather of backgammon. At least that's been a pretty solid suggestion. So here we have that, and what this game teaches you is that every step you take in your process is going to potentially be met with hazard, with the universe rolling the dice for you and altering your plans whether you wanted them to or not. And it also teaches you that this is an absolutely essential part of the process, because without this hazard, nothing new happens. Some thoughts, Noor?
Yeah, I mean, one way I'd begun to understand this is that in a universe where everything is basically predictable, and one thing leads to another in pretty predictable ways, you don't have that sense of creativity involved. You don't have that sense of engagement. You don't really get to have new things emerge from what came before. You have some very vocal puppies behind you.
Yes, I know.
However, when you do have chance involved, this creates the opportunity for genuine creativity. It creates that tension that gives us that sense of either being in danger or being on the edge of adventure. Both of those things are two sides of the same coin, and they can only emerge from a situation in which there is this sense of chance, of risk, specifically risk that cannot be mitigated by some planning or strategizing or calculating. None of those things are going to work here. However, you can still respond to that unmitigatable risk in ways that are meaningful, productive, beneficial,
And can get you through the shock points, as it were.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, here's an interesting thing. We're going to backtrack just for a second to give you guys more context. The word hazard. Now, we know hazard meaning, it means a game of dice from the 1300s, from Old French. I spent today looking at this. The origin is uncertain. They think it was from Spanish azar, which means an unfortunate card or throw of the dice, which is said to be from the Arabic azar or al-zar, the die or the dice. Now, this is weird, and this is from no less source than Encyclopedia Britannica. They are insisting that this word is Arabic in origin, but I was actually on with a friend who is a native Arabic speaker and lives in the Emirates, trying to find the origin of this word because it's not an Arabic word. I know it from Turkish. In Turkish, a die is zar. So I'm suspecting that this may be a Turkish loan word. But, or it could be Arabic yasara, which means to play dice, according to the encyclopedia. The Spanish tend to trade letters in the Arabic. But in any way, there is always in this word the connotation of rolling the dice and the connotation of loss, harm, or risk. And there's more about this than we actually even need to go into. But bear this in mind as we talk, that this is a concept that goes way back, and it's always about casting the dice. There's actually a game of dice I found out named Hazard, which is a bit like craps. The Brits played it, so maybe the Aussies know about this.
I guess not. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. We get something to learn about, everybody.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the universe casting its dice for you. The most important thing about this to me is that without this concept of hazard, without having to deal with this in the world, there's no use for intelligence. You don't have to be smart to deal with the predictable. You have to be smart to deal with the unpredictable. If that makes sense to you.
What does that bring up for you guys? What do you think might be true if we say, or why do you think it might be that this suggestion is being made that sorry, my track is spaced out. What were you saying? Intelligence and
intelligence also
dealing with hazard.
Yeah, dealing with hazard. There is no discovery without hazard.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that's an important thing. There's really no opportunity without hazard. Hazard and opportunity are two sides of the same coin.
So, with that said,
yes,
I want to open the floor up to you guys. What's coming up for you when you hear that? What do you think, Nancy?
Well, there's the general idea that life needs to be in the realm where there is some order and some chaos. You can't live in an environment that is too much one or the other. I guess you need enough predictability to build, but enough chaos to shake things up.
I think that's a very reasonable thought.
yes. Yeah, so what does this look like for us? This was not a rhetorical question.
What do you think, Dave?
I agree with the hazard thing. For me, the word, like the cleverness or the intellect thing, is a little bit. I like using perhaps sly or cunning or that Greek word metis, because I've many times, even 6 before breakfast, sabotaged my own life with my intelligence. So it's not really that quality. It's the sly use of one's capacities is more
Yep.
towards how I think it is. A little bit like that juggling quote that you put into the group the other day. That type of thing.
Yeah. And it's also the idea of, for you, here you are sitting down to write your book. You have all of the ideas, you're ready to go, and the moment you put fingers to keyboard, Sophie starts screaming in the other room.
Yes, this is why I've been writing in the middle of the night. This is why I look like a raccoon.
Oh, you've still got rainbow face though, so there's that. Yeah, I mean, there is this element of cleverness, of ingenuity, even. That's why I used the word creativity earlier. However, I think the way we're using intelligence in this sense, similarly to how Bennett uses it, is that as opposed to the intelligence of a computer, which is basically like a mechanical calculator with beeps and boops and all that stuff, we aren't talking about that kind of intelligence. Yeah.
Now, we're talking about the kind of intelligence that we develop theoretically back before we were even human, when we were swinging from the branches, brachiating across the rainforest. And we developed the desire for novelty. We crave novelty, and the suggestion is that this comes literally from swinging through the trees, not knowing where the next branch is going to be until it's right there, and having to calculate literally on the fly, so that we don't hit the ground where all of the tigers and stuff are.
Mm. Yep.
And I forget who told me about this. But they pointed out that doing repetitive tasks tends to put us into trance very, very quickly because our neurology craves novelty. So when we embrace hazard, we get all the novelty we could possibly want.
Yeah. It kind of feeds that curiosity drive.
Yeah, and it creates risk. And frankly, in the work, a little risk is a good thing. I mean, I'm not a proponent of the risk everything. You've got to do something that is going to be so dangerous you may not survive it most of the time. That's more risk than we need, I think. Most of us anyway.
Yeah. This is kind of in line with what we were discussing last week about streams. Nonetheless, you know, when you risk, it's you know, for some reason I'm thinking of Brene Brown and like daring greatly and all that stuff, because that's relevant here in the sense that on some level, yeah, you do risk great losses and also risk great rewards when you do take on a lot of hazard. But to make incremental gains over the course of a lifetime, let's say, it is in the little things, in the medium things, that you make the most progress.
So, anybody got any good examples of hazard in their life?
I'm sure we
I
do.
was recalling a exercise in canyoning, and we got to the bottom of the valley, and to get back up the other side, we had to go through a riverbed with this boulders with this big. They weren't big enough to put a foot on and stand on, but we had to cross this, and the hazard is you're going to break your ankle. So how we're going to get across it was to not overthink it, and we had to do it really quick because you've got full pack, full everything on, and you're lightly stepping on these boulders from one to the other. And the ones who were really good at it just flew across that riverbed, and I was always astounded by that. And I was observing those who were being super cautious, who were sliding off that curve and banging their ankles and really suffering. And you just made me think that sometimes we overthink things and then we really get messed up, and that's why we are adverse to hazard. Whereas those who can make a decision, just make a decision, just live with the decision. It doesn't, you're not going to die. You're certainly going to get bumped, but we get caught up in the possibility or anticipation of being hurt, and I think that's what stops us from diving into hazard. But if we practice enough of boulder hopping and things like that, then you make a decision, and then you have to live with the next decision and the next decision, and it'll be okay. You know, it's not like someone's got to go into your head. It's not that kind of risk. But we have a lot of things that we risk. We risk crossing the road in Vietnam with the street around. Try that for risk. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's an awesome way of diving into a hazard. And if you stop, you will be hit. You must keep moving. There you go.
Yeah, there's a few places like that. Crossing the road in Tehran is also taking your life into your hands, as I'm sure Zainab can attest.
Crossing as well as driving.
Yes. Iranians are interesting drivers. They just go, mashallah, and throw up their hands and go blasting through because they know that they will only crash if God wills. This is my theory, but it's a little bit terrifying.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
Yes.
How would you use that hazard to pass the shock point?
Ah, now that is a good question. Noor?
I have to chew on this a bit. Sorry to say, I gotta pass the torch to you on this one, Shai.
You do? Oh, well. Let me see. So, you know what you're planning. You have set your intention and you get to the first shock. And you're there and the universe goes rattle, 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 toss, and you get all zeros. And that means you're going to lose your turn and everything's going to go to shit. And so you are given this, and your job at this point is to go, okay, I'm given this and I still have the outcome that I want, which means I have to get through this shock. What can I do differently to get me through this point? How can I play this in such a way that I succeed in crossing the shock point? And that may be, if I'm playing the game, it might mean playing a different piece that I was planning on playing. It might be allowing myself to lay back for a turn and let things pile up behind me or in front of me, or let people pass me on the game so that I can then jump on them on the next round.
So this is where creativity comes in, and cleverness, and that quality of slyness that Dave was mentioning, because it allows you to see these alternative possibilities that might be a little bit different from what you originally envisioned. Yeah?
But still get you to the same place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Zainab?
I have an example of a hazard experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some years ago, me and my brother, we bought an old sailboat. Needed an enormous amount of fixing up. And it was my job to fix it up and to learn how to sail it, theoretically. And even though that, I'm getting to the hazard point in a bit, that stretched me enormously to be able to do that part of things. But was I going to take the sailboat out into the blue yonder? Hell no. I don't have the courage for that. That's where all the hazardous areas suddenly jump in. That was my brother's department. He was like, all right, we're going. And I was like, okay. I was riding off his courage, and we took that boat out many times for quite adventurous trips, quite far offshore. And the hazard was a constant companion for me
Definitely.
on those trips.
Yep.
But they were some of the most memorable times of my life.
I think that's a really great
Yeah.
example. Yeah.
And you probably learned tons of stuff.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And you're right that risk and hazard are ever present. I mean, even just like stupid everyday decisions, it may seem like there's no big deal, but when we talk about hazard in this sense, it is not something that you can choose to opt out of. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
But in a situation where you are, for adventure, like you're talking about, this is could go two ways. Like it could be an adventure in which it ends well and you have lots of beautiful memories, or it could be an adventure that goes sideways and shipwrecks happen and drownings and all this horrible stuff, or whatever awful scenarios we could imagine. But without taking on that hazard, the positive things that you experienced could not have happened at all.
Yeah. And that gets us to one of the main practices to work with hazard is because hazard is going to happen no matter what. I mean, you can hide in the basement of your house and hazard will still happen. The pipes will break, and they'll probably be the sewer pipes. So,
Just your luck.
yeah, so anytime you walk out the door, this is one of the things I do. Anytime I walk out the door, and I'm, say, going to walk down to the store and lay in some supplies for the week, I bear in mind that things can go pear-shaped at any moment. And that allows me to stay alert. If you realize that the tiger can jump out at you from any direction, you will be more awake. The trick is you have to balance this with a relaxed attitude. Otherwise, you're going to get paranoid and slightly fried.
Yeah.
So the trick is to hold a very calm attitude, but at the same time, paying attention to your environment to know what hazard is going to come at you when the universe rolls its dice. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know if that was your answer to Mr. Keem's question, but I should speak that. Mr. Keem asked, how is hazard placed in Sufism?
Yes, that is part of my answer to that. Gurdjieff used to say that the main thing that keeps holding people back from their own development is the lack of realization that they're going to die. And that means you think you have all the time in the world. One of the things that engaging with hazard teaches you is that you don't have all the times in the world, and the universe could squash you at any moment. I mean, God is rolling the dice all the time. And eventually it's going to come up snake eyes for you. we try and avoid it, but when you can't avoid it, it's going to happen, and the knowledge that that is there is going to tell you that you don't have all the time in the world to do the work. You cannot wait till next week.
Nan, Shuri, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I did have a thought that sometimes we view hazard as knocking us on the butt and then we just can't get up. But it actually is, if you can change your attitude to hazard and embrace it as a blessing,
Mm-hmm.
and you just see, wow, that's another opportunity I didn't even see that coming, you know, or we actually think that life is fair. We sort of get lulled into the sense that it's going to be fair. I did this, so things should unfold this way. And all of a sudden, boom, something happens. Like, for example, we had a house. We love this house. We built it. We did all the right things, blah, 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 and then we lost it. Bang, it was pulled out from under us. And then we lost it and more and lost. And we just think, oh, shit. You know, what do we do now? You know, that wasn't fair. The bank wasn't playing fair. The economy wasn't playing fair. I didn't do, it's not fair. Not fair. And you play, and you have this, and all of a sudden you say either I can live here and suffer with my own mental games, or you think, what have I really got? What have I really got? Where's that blessing? What is the joy? What wonder I can get out of this? And one thing we did get was we were finally liberated, taken care of a house. And it was just like, wow, that actually felt good. And we didn't have to worry about anything else anymore, about anything that goes to maintenance and whatever. We found that if we had each other, we ate, we had a shelter, we were dry, we had a hot shower, it was all good, you know. So we had to change that. But boy, did we suffer initially, and we suffered because our family and friends told us we were crazy and we should have done this, this, and this. But if I'd known what to do, I would have done it. But it was, life was unfair, and I think that's what we get caught in, fairness. Not fair. God, sometimes not fair.
Yeah.
I don't deserve that.
Yep. So life is either completely not fair or utterly fair. You can look at it either way, because the universe doesn't care who you are. It's going to kill you. Right? You can be Jeff Bezos and have all the money in the world. The universe is going to get your ass. And you cannot buy it off.
Yep.
And, you know, the universe promises everybody a terminal point in their life. So that's ultimately fair. As a poor person, I have the same opportunity to live out my life as Bezos does. And all of his billions will not give him 1 second beyond his allotted time when the universe rolls those dice and it ends up snake eyes for him. So, in that sense, life is ultimately fair. It doesn't care who you are, it will find ways to screw you over.
Mm.
And if we think about it, we will see that with everybody. Right? There is not one really big, powerful, important person that I can think of who hasn't been kicked in the teeth by the universe, at least once. They all face their hazard, no matter what they do.
Well, one thing I'm thinking is, okay, life isn't fair, but sometimes people do sue the bastards and they win. But maybe the correct attitude is to view that as another adventure.
Say that last part again.
Maybe the correct attitude is to view suing the bastards see it as another adventure.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly has its hazards, that's for sure. And the potential is there for a positive outcome. But if that's what someone wants to commit to, then yeah, I do think that could be an adventure worth taking on, depending on the context. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about was I can see the attitude of accepting hazard as part of life, but there are people who tend to assume that the particular disasters that hit them or hit other people are sort of messages, specific messages from the universe.
Yeah, those people are crazy.
Thank you. That's reassuring.
No, those people are totally nuts.
So let's unpack that a little bit. Who are we talking
Okay.
about? Yeah.
Well, when I hear that, I think of like the preachers who say, oh, that hurricane hit because you let gay marriage happen. Things like that. You know, like the specific hazard is because of something. And my sense is that hazard happens and it doesn't need an excuse. Anybody who says, this disaster happened to you because you don't believe in Jesus the way I do is crazy.
Yeah, well, there's also the non-Christian version of this happened because you were thinking the wrong way.
Oh yeah, the whole like.
Oh yeah,
manifestation
God,
thing.
gonna get me started on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, you might be entertaining.
I might be. I have a soapbox for that one because I consider that the biggest pile of horse shit that I've ever run across. This idea that you choose everything that happens to you. Your thoughts brought it to you. No, it is not true. It is a lie. Shit happens.
I have an acquaintance who went through this. Basically, she had a miscarriage, and on the one hand, she had her mother saying, "What did you do?" Like in a religious, conservative sense, where she was like, "You brought this upon yourself because you're not a believer." And then at work, she had a lot of coworkers who were talking about like their own lives and developing this kind of work culture of people talking about how they brought their own daily misfortunes upon themselves because of some belief in manifesting those happenings for themselves. So she was exposed to it on both sides, where
Yeah.
she was internalizing this sense that maybe I did make this happen to myself, and it was really sad and definitely was not anything that benefited her, that hurt her.
Yeah. And this gets us to the other point of hazard, is that it frees you from that. Because the fact of the matter is that if you do stupid things, sometimes you will get negative results. And if you don't do anything stupid, sometimes you'll get negative results.
Yeah.
No matter what. I mean, I know the woman she's talking about. Decent person. Didn't do anything to deserve that. The dice just rolled up wrong for her. And the only thing she's responsible for is her response to it. The only thing that she has going for her is how she deals with it. But yeah, I've run across this. I used to do a lot of women's self-defense work with a friend who was, she was one of the better women's self-defense teachers on the planet as far as I was concerned. And, we would get women who had been assaulted and brutalized and all of this, and every single one of them had had somebody telling them, you caused this, you drew this to yourself. There was something about what you were doing that made this come to you.
Yeah, I've
And
heard that.
yeah, we've all heard that. And the fact of the matter is that no, you didn't. Even if you were doing stupid shit, you didn't cause that person to do those things. And that can be very freeing to realize that your shit happens, hazard exists. You have to respond to it as best you can, but there's no blame for random shit happening to you. You're walking down the street, a car jumps the curb and whacks into you. You did not draw this to you. I'm sorry. No matter what the new age airheads tell you, you did not draw that to you. Hazard rolled its dice and it happened. So, how do you respond to it? That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's the Sufi way, Ralph. When life gives you adversity, what do? And everybody was quiet.
Yeah, well, giving everyone a moment to think.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sydney?
Well, usually I'll either get angry and or cry. So I'm realizing that I don't handle hazard very well. I've got the planning side down, don't have the relaxing about that down.
Yeah, it's not easy stuff, Sydney. You're not alone in that. I have been there.
Yep.
So, Mr. Keem is asking, to deal with hazard, is there any mantra or prayer to say to avoid it?
And the answer to that is no.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. Is this is, this is unavoidable hazard. This is what
Though there is a prayer that you can make that goes something along the lines of, "Oh God, please prepare me to stay awake through the hazards that are sent to me." That is a good prayer.
So, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to verbalize this, but what's coming up for me is, this separate, shall we say, from, from the perspective of there being a God and God meddling in human affairs or whatever. As Sufis, we say, oh, that person is a friend of God and God's going to look out for them. How, if at all, does that relate to talking about hazard?
That is a very good question, because even though that person is God's friend, God's going to kill that guy.
Yeah, okay.
But before he does, he's going to, look out for him. He's going to make sure that his donkey doesn't get ate by the lion. So, the way this works, as far as I can tell, is that it puts you in a position where you can live a life of flow. And the thing about flow is that flow thrives on hazard. As a matter of fact, one of the classic ways to put yourself into flow state is to do something incredibly stupid, dangerous, and crazy, like jumping off a cliff in a wingsuit.
So it's that immediacy.
It's the immediacy where you have to be on top of it and you have to move with it. So, the friend of God. will still experience hazard. But if they are truly a friend of God, then they will flow with that hazard. They will surrender to the moment, as it were, and allow the creativity of the moment to come out and guide them through it.
Yeah.
Or they'll
So,
whack into the wall.
I mean, that kind of brings to mind the law of due diligence, which
Yes.
is you are doing your part to encounter hazard and sort of in embracing, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you said, you're moving with it. You're almost collaborating with it. And of course, things can go sideways no matter what you do, but nonetheless, you're in the flow of that.
They will go sideways.
Yeah.
I can give you an example from my own life that you knew or know.
Mm.
So when I moved out to California, I came out here specifically to start the nine-sided circle. That was my plan. And I had a friend who said, come and live at my house, because he knew that I was trying to get out here. And I got there, and then I discovered that he was completely nuts. He had gone out of his mind. He and his partner were utterly insane, and that it was literally not safe to live there. He was shooting steroids pretty much constantly, and some of the steroids were kind of questionable. And it had definite negative effect on his mental health. So here I was in a place that I literally had no friends. I had used up a bunch of my resources to get there and to help them survive, because they were both out of work and
Yeah, you
living
were
off of
trying to
Campbell's soup. Yeah.
Contribute. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it came to the point of realizing there is nothing to save here. And I could have freaked out. I could have done all manner of stupid things. But fortunately, in that moment at least, I kind of relaxed into it and ended up finding a great place to live for a year or so. Which you all will have seen if you watch any of the early videos, because that place with the buffalo skull was my refuge when all of that happened. And that allowed me the space and time to work with Noor and build the nine-sided circle. So, and this is, I mean, there are probably 100 better ways to handle it than I did, but
It was a meaningful response. It was
yeah,
one that moved us forward.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And even though it was rolling craps in that moment, rolling snake eyes, staying in the flow of it allowed me to move through it and out the other side. So now I'm in this beautiful place that you see here, at least in my mind.
Where does this fit with, as I recall from the sort of Sufi principles for living, the thing of watch where you're going, don't do things that are obviously stupid.
Yeah,
that is just as true, even in a world of hazard. I mean, regardless, this is
yeah, watch your
just the way
step
things are.
always
Yeah.
applies. And that's like walking to the store that I was talking about earlier. I'm watching my step because I know that at any moment the universe is going to roll its dice and see what comes up for me. And it will literally alter my plans in certain ways.
Well, because cause and effect are also in play simultaneously, correct?
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I mean by thinking about the law of due diligence is, random things will happen, but a lot of things will pan out a certain way because of one thing leading to another in a more causal, not necessarily metaphysical sense like people tend to talk about it these days. So things can start out with a roll of the dice that leads to causal things, or it could start out as a causal thing and then end with the dice rolling. I mean, we have to think about things in more complex terms. and they're also not necessarily linear. So in a big picture sense, all of this stuff is happening sort of simultaneously, as I said, which is confusing, and we could get lost in it in the sense that we just succumb either to taking no constructive action intentionally, or we could just assume that things are going to go one way or another in advance and that it doesn't matter anyway. But I think we know, for those of us who are actively engaging with our lives, that neither of those ends up, shall we say, feeling true. What do you think, Much Talk?
I think that that is quite accurate.
Yeah, I mean, we could just scoot along
Let's scoot along.
in the sense that you can ride life in the sense of not taking part in it. That's always an option. But
Yeah, and
you are
that's
not going
probably
to
the most
enjoy
common option.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
sleeping your way through life is what we see people do. Then they're surprised when the building collapses on them.
Yeah. Or if they're bored out of their minds and they're like, why does my life have no meaning? That's in that sense, hazard is an ally to us.
Yes. So, hazard keeps you sharp. If you didn't have hazard in your life, you would have no need for intelligence. I mean, think about the creature that lives underneath the ice somewhere and has no predators. It just sits there and filter feeds. That creature has no need for higher functions because nothing wants to eat it and it just has food coming. Very much like a college student. Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, that would be an example of very minimal hazard and very minimal loss or gain as a result. Yeah.
I think choosing to get married can be a very emotionally hazardous decision to make, certainly from personal experience. And I know the new generation seem to be very reticent about getting married. Understandably so.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what we have shown them in my generation that would make them think it was a good idea.
Well, I think we've also got a culture that expects people to be very cautious a lot of the time.
I do think that's true. I think also it feels, at least, that there are a lot more moving parts now in life. And I think that leads people to feeling like they want to simplify. And one way of doing that is to, I guess we could say, opt out of things that could introduce a lot of hazards, such as what Jonathan was saying about marriage.
Mhm.
And of course, sometimes this is a perceived thing. Sometimes marriages are really supportive and grounding and actually reduce that sense of risk and discomfort and fear in our very enriching in a positive adventure sort of way. But for people who are hearing mostly about fear-causing stuff, I think they tend to pull back. So yeah, that's a good point, Nancy.
Yeah, and you might look at, rather than looking at marriage, because that is basically either the state or some religion licensing you to live with your partner,
Yeah.
look at people who are in committed relationships, which are also getting less and less.
That's another thing about hazard, is that to take it on means committing.
Yes.
And that may be a flexible commitment in the sense that you are responding to context in a way that makes sense to you and feels grounded and appropriate. However, you're still making a commitment to that process. And when a person is able to do that, that's when they're in the flow of that hazard. But I think even the commitment itself at this point has proven to be so, beyond the comfort zone, beyond what seems like an appropriate risk to be taken up voluntarily. And that's interesting. I'm not exactly sure what to think about that culturally yet.
Yeah. There is also a connection, and we haven't mentioned this yet, between hazard and super effort.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Real super efforts often, not always, but often deal with confronting hazard. This is the kind of stuff that I'm not talking about the let's go out and work till we puke kind of pseudo super effort. I'm talking about the real super efforts, which may involve puking as well, but from a different place. And I think that it would be safe to say that hazard is an essential element in proper effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do agree with you. As we've said, hazard is always there, but do we embrace it? That's the tough part. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think we've said everything we needed to say about
I
this.
think we're a
So
little in our heads tonight, which is fine. I feel like this is really deep stuff in a way, It makes you look at the world differently.
So I'm going to actually switch the view to Brady Bunch view so we can
Yay.
see everybody and tell us what you think. Talk with us. You all look
Yeah.
wonderful, by the way.
Dave.
I think the thing that I view it as is how you respond to that hazard that will inevitably come is very important, because we've all had hazards that had terrible outcomes and were not much fun at all. But I've also had ones it's just like it pops up and you solve it, and you solve it in a cool way, and it's like, yeah, like that's a very stimulating type of thing. Like, and these could be just like contrived hazards in certain types of games or physical activities or things like that. Like you were talking about before with the swing from the trees, like if you slip on like something and you catch yourself, that's like a very small instance of, I put in some training and I could have had a like big injury, but I just kind of looked like a fool sliding down the staircase and catching myself midway, which probably enhanced someone else's life from seeing it. So
Well, yeah, and it can have like a feeling of triumph to it as well.
Yeah, it has a very
Yeah.
positive flavor. There was also, I was reading a book on somatics while taking a shit this morning, as I sometimes do. And there was this paragraph in it that said it was to do with the fight and flight response. And then there's the freeze one.
Yeah.
And I got a little like thing. It's just like, well, if you have three options of fight or flight or freeze, you can also do training that helps with all of those. You can do martial arts for the fight, you can do parkour or running for the flight, and you can learn various types of relaxation and bodywork skills to discharge freeze responses. So preparing oneself for hazards that will come is not that difficult. The tools are all sitting in front of you, but you do have to actually do them, because knowing about these things doesn't normally help you with the hazard so much.
No, knowing about them is great coffee table talk, but not much more than that. Also, interestingly, and they don't often mention this, there are two kinds of freeze. There is the freeze of prey when you go, boo, and then there is the freeze of the predator as it waits. Totally different states of consciousness for these, and each needs to be cultivated.
So it sounds like you feel there's a place for those.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a place for both of them. Both in the moment, like if you freeze because, oh, there's a mountain lion on the trail. You know, you want that freeze to be perfect so the mountain lion doesn't know you. And then you want to, as Dave said, be able to discharge it afterwards, because there's a lot of stuff trapped in your body from that moment. And at the same time, learning to be completely still as you wait for the deer to come down the trail is a powerful skill, because you have to be still while remaining awake. If you go to sleep, first of all, you're going to scare the deer away with your snoring. And secondly, you will miss the point of the hunt, which is to bring home dinner. So I'm not sure if these are two sides of the same coin, but I know that they are outwardly, they have some seeming relationship with the stillness. The freeze of the predator, though, I will tell you, is a lot more fun than the freeze of the prey.
Yep. Well, I mean, this is where resiliency comes in, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are talking in this case about natural things that our body does to, you know, ideally speaking, protect us, or, you know, have us use our bodies to our benefit in some way. So how do we bolster that in ways that aren't just mechanical? How do we make them part of flow, right? And that's kind of what Dave is talking about, is giving your body opportunities to practice these things in contexts that are intentional, and thereby helping you shape a response that you might do automatically in a way that is more streamlined or functional, for lack of a better word. And all that is certainly part of dealing with hazard well.
This is true.
Jonathan.
I had a question.
Sure.
Mushtaq, have you ever had a student that's just been leaning on you and so dependent on you for making all the decisions, what they should be doing next, and you've had to push them away and go do something hazardous?
Nope. That's because I would never take on a person like that as a student in the first place.
He's good at that.
Yeah.
He's good at recognizing that.
But I have had people who have been a little bit like that. And we'll talk some about that next Sunday, actually, because for the evening Sunday talk, we're doing, I think, the Enneagram of Sacrifice.
Mm.
And sacrificing one's students is always fun.
Uh-oh. Oh, yep. Any other thoughts? Sydney, how are you? I know when you first chimed in, you were thinking, oh, I need to work on this. So what's coming up for you now, do you think? Like, what openings might you find?
Honestly, I think I need to give myself a little bit of credit if I look back on different hazards and how I have gone through them.
Likely so.
I have I've done it in a good way, and I'm recognizing that there needs to be a little bit more practicing of this idea of flow and creativity when it comes.
Hmm. Yep.
That's like the best possible answer we could get.
Yeah. I mean, I am glad to hear that you are recognizing points in, historically that you did do something that you feel like was a resilient choice, a good dance with hazard. I'm glad to hear that.
Zainab, what do you think?
I'm trying to connect the flow idea with what Dave mentioned with flight and fight, or the freeze as well. So the flow how would you connect them?
Well, in the fight, it's pretty easy to find flow in practice for the fight. You know, if you're training in a martial art, or you do something like fighting monkey. Fighting monkey is great for finding flow in movement. For flight, as Dave said, parkour is, you can't hardly beat that. You know, for escaping from danger, holy crap. Leaping off buildings, flying through strange places, diving through holes hardly bigger than your body. All of that's kind of stuff.
Well, I think a big part of this is that quality of being present, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to just kind of dissociating and going on autopilot while, getting into an argument with someone, or freezing in fear while you basically are internally spacing out.
So if you are training for, or you're training for something, you want to cultivate that 3 aspect as well as being awake and in the flow state.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make more sense? Good. Yeah. I think the way, I'm glad Dave brought this up, because I think we do tend to talk in modern parlance about fight, flight, freeze responses being negative and not useful, but we have them for a reason. It's just that we kind of lost the presence part of it all. We're out of practice, as it were, in that regard. Awareness, attunement, all those things. Yep.
So we're running out of time. Any last thoughts before we carry on?
Well, one that I just want to bring up, I think you mentioned about discharging.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just thinking about Peter Levine's stuff about how part of what prevents PTSD is going off and shaking for a while after you've had a bad shock.
Yeah, we've talked
Yeah.
about that.
Yep.
haven't we?
Yeah, the ability to actively discharge that kind of energy is a definite survival tool. And shaking is one of the ways to do it.
Yep. And as we mentioned previously, we see prey animal like deer do that after they've had like a really quick sprint getting away from a predator. They shake a bunch because they're shaking off all that hormone release that happens when they have that instant response to a threat. Gotta shake it off. So, yeah, good call, Nancy.
All right, so let's wrap this up and turn off the recording. Next week is our 2 Sundays, or our 2 Talk Sunday.
Yeah, it's our third Sunday of the month, so we'll be
Yes,
doing that.
we will be talking in at 10 a.m. our time, and
10:30
it's
a.m.
10:30 at our time. Yes, thank you.
That's,
Don't want to get up any
Pacific.
earlier than we have to.
Yes, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time on Sunday.
Yep, and that's like 6:30 in the evening in London and 11 or 10:30 in the evening in Dubai, and so all of our friends out there can actually be awake and talk to us.
Yep,
And we will still be doing the
6:30.
6 o'clock. And the topic for next week on the early show is going to be The Conference of the Birds, which is one of the most important Sufi books ever written. And in the evening, we're going to talk about the Enneagram of Sacrifice.
So it'll be a full day.
Yeah,
and
so bring your knives.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of sacrifice, folks. But
All right. No humans being sacrificed next week, we promise.
not even any sheeps.
Yay. All right. So, shall we? Can we still bring our knives? Okay, if you insist, bring them. You can show them off to the class.
Yeah. Yeah, we like knives. We have knives laying everywhere around here. Where's my knives? I have one right here. I'll show off my knife. This is a knife. This is called a parrying dagger. It's designed to. Oh yeah. This is one of the sharp that I got to go with my side sword that somebody gave me for Christmas. Yeah, so that I could have an ensuite pair. But it's designed to parry swords trying to poke you while you poke somebody else. And it just happens that the two of them live within arm's reach.
Dave says, just for cutting cheese with, officer.
Yeah.
That's right. But if you say, like, ossifer even, then you'll really get, no ticket for you. All right, guys, let's wave goodbye to everybody who's watching live.
Bye, folks.
Thanks for being here, and we will see you soon. Bye.